Power in Washington rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it speaks in pauses, in silences, in departures that arrive earlier than planned. When a foreign ambassador leaves his post ahead of schedule, official statements are polite, grateful, carefully worded. But beneath that language is a harder question, one we should not ignore. What happens when personal conviction collides with presidential power? I want you to sit with this story. An experienced statesman, a close ally, a single line spoken years earlier remembered at exactly the wrong moment, and a president who does not forget. This is not just about Kevin Rudd. It is about how modern diplomacy works when politics becomes personal, when memory becomes leverage, and when alliances depend not only on shared interests, but on shared restraint. If you care about how power really operates in the 21st century, stay with me, because this story is bigger than one man. And to understand it, we need to step back before the remarks, before the tension, before the moment everything quietly changed. To understand why this matters, we need to be precise about the problem in front of us. On the surface, this looks simple. An ambassador criticized Donald Trump years ago. Trump returned to power. The ambassador leaves early. Case closed. But diplomacy is never that linear. The real issue is not what was said. It is when memory becomes power. Kevin Rudd was not a fringe figure. He was a former prime minister, a seasoned diplomat representing one of America's closest allies. His job was not to agree, but to navigate, to absorb pressure without becoming the story himself. And yet, in an era where politics is deeply personal, old words do not fade. They wait, they resurface, they acquire new weight once power shifts. This is the central tension. Can modern diplomacy survive in a world where leaders treat criticism as permanent disloyalty? Or does every sentence, every tweet, every past belief become a liability once the political wind changes? To answer that, we have to look backward. To see how we arrived here, we need to zoom out away from the personalities and look at the system that shaped them. Kevin Rudd belongs to an older diplomatic tradition, one built on institutions, continuity, and the belief that alliances outlast individuals. He came of age politically when criticism was absorbed, not archived, when disagreements were negotiated, not screenshot. But the world changed. Over the last decade, politics entered a new cycle, one driven by permanent visibility. Social media collapsed time. Statements made in one context now live forever in another. Power no longer resets when administrations change. Memory accumulates. Donald Trump did not invent this system, but he mastered it. In his political universe, loyalty is personal, neutrality is suspicious, and past criticism is not historical, it is current. At the same time, the global backdrop hardened, so US-China rivalry became the organizing principle of world politics. Australia, sitting uncomfortably between its security guarantor and its largest trading partner, needed a diplomat fluent in both worlds. Rudd was uniquely qualified and uniquely exposed. That contradiction expertise paired with vulnerability set the stage for what came next. The first crack appeared in public, and it was brief, almost theatrical. October, Washington. A visiting Australian Prime Minister standing beside a newly returned Donald Trump. A reporter asks a seemingly harmless question. Were past remarks the reason a meeting came so late? Trump pauses, then looks directly at Kevin Rudd. He asks if the ambassador is still working for him. What follows is not a diplomatic exchange. It is a moment of raw power. Rudd tries to explain. He clarifies that his comments were made before he became ambassador. He barely finishes the sentence. I don't like you either, Trump says. I don't, and I probably never will. In that instant, the rules shift. Because in diplomacy, what is said publicly is rarely the point. What matters is what becomes signal. That moment told every official in the room something unmistakable. The past was not past. If you're watching this and thinking this felt small, pause. Power is often exercised in seconds, not speeches. Remember this moment. Share it if you think politics is only about policy, because this wasn't. And from here on, everything changes quietly. What happened next did not unfold as scandal. There were no expulsions, no formal rebukes, no diplomatic rupture. That is precisely the point. Modern power rarely needs to act loudly. It operates through atmosphere, through signals that reshape behavior without issuing orders. The hidden mechanism here is anticipatory compliance. Once a line is crossed, once it is clear that personal memory matters, everyone adjusts, not because they are told to, but because they understand the cost of not adjusting. For an ambassador, this creates an impossible equation. You are meant to speak honestly to your home government, to advise, to interpret, to warn, but you must do so without ever becoming a source of friction yourself. When trust erodes at the top, the role hollows out. Officially, Kevin Rudd continued to work well with the administration. Statements remained courteous, productive, but diplomacy depends on access, tone, and goodwill. Intangibles that cannot be documented, only felt. And once those intangibles thin, departure becomes a solution without accusation. No blame assigned, no conflict declared, just an ending that arrives earlier than planned. And when that happens, the system sends a message to every diplomat watching. The second pressure point is less visible but more dangerous. It sits at the intersection of diplomacy and global strategy. Kevin Rudd was not just an ambassador, he was a leading interpreter of US-China relations at a moment when that relationship defines the world. Trade, technology, security, everything flows through it. That made him valuable, and that made him sensitive, because when great power rivalry intensifies, neutrality shrinks. Every position is read as alignment. Every expertise is questioned for motive. Rudd's deep knowledge of China, his work with Asia Society and the Center for China Analysis was an asset in theory. In practice, it placed him under constant scrutiny, not because he acted improperly, but because the system itself became suspicious of nuance. As Washington hardened its stance, space for independent analysis narrowed. Ambassadors were no longer just bridges. They became symbols of loyalty, of trust, of personal compatibility with those in power. Once that shift occurs, the question is no longer, can you do the job? It becomes, should you still be there? Now bring this down to where it touches you. If you work in any system, you recognize this moment. The moment when saying the wrong thing even years ago suddenly matters more than what you're doing right now. You choose words more carefully. You hesitate. You internalize limits without anyone spelling them out. That is how power trains people. For citizens, this reshapes democracy itself. Debate narrows. Expertise becomes risky. Honesty acquires a cost. The space for independent judgment shrinks, not by law, but by consequence. If this resonates with you, pause, share it, talk about it, because silence spreads faster than censorship. And the effects do not stop at national borders. Australia is not a marginal player. It is central to America's Indo-Pacific strategy. What happens between Canberra and Washington is watched closely in Beijing, Tokyo, Seoul, and across Southeast Asia. The signal is subtle but powerful. Personal chemistry now rivals policy alignment. History does not disappear when power changes hands. It returns. Other countries take note. Envoys are chosen not just for competence, but for compatibility. In a world of strong leaders and long memories, diplomacy grows more fragile. And then there is China. Every shift inside the US-Australia relationship is read through that lens. Any thinning of trust creates uncertainty. Not collapse, but opportunity. This is how global order erodes. Quietly, incrementally, through recalibrations that accumulate. From here, the future splits into three paths. The optimistic one. Institutions reassert themselves. Personal grievances fade. Professional norms recover. The middle path, Personalization becomes normal. Diplomacy functions but with less candor, fewer voices, more caution. And the dangerous path, loyalty tests replace expertise. Criticism becomes disqualifying. Diplomacy turns into domestic politics by other means. History is clear on this point. Systems do not fail from one decision. They weaken through incentives that reward silence over truth. Which path we take depends on what we tolerate. This story ends quietly. No scandal, no rupture, just an ambassador leaving early and a system revealing how it now works. Kevin Rudd remains in America. He continues working on the defining question of our era, US-China relations. Officially, nothing is broken. But informally, something has shifted. Power today demands more than compliance. It demands memory, alignment, emotional resonance, and when politics becomes personal, institutions grow thinner even when they survive. If this analysis helped you see power more clearly, subscribe, share it, stay curious, because the next story will go even deeper, and the future will belong to those who understand how the system actually moves.